Before anything else, a quick warning. This story is a fictional dramatization created purely for entertainment. Now let's step into a scenario that shocks even the most seasoned viewers. What would it look like if the most widely adored figure in entertainment, someone celebrated for decades as a symbol of optimism, generosity, and genuine human warmth, walked into what he believed was a routine talk show interview, only to be blindsided by hostility? How does the world react when a man known for kindness is suddenly thrust into the center of a storm he never saw coming? Imagine Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, an icon whose smile can brighten an arena, a man who goes out his way to respond to fans, donate quietly, and bring comfort to children in hospitals without media attention, taking a seat on a daytime show expecting laughs, storytelling, and positivity. But instead of conversation, he finds himself facing sharp, unrelenting criticism fueled by invented controversies and exaggerated rumors. And this is where things take a dramatic turn. This isn't your typical awkward celebrity moment. This isn't one more tense interview destined to go viral and then fade away. This is a story, fictional yet intense, of a host determined to tear down a beloved figure, and of a man whose patience, compassion, and inner strength are pushed to the edge. Over the next 30 minutes, Joy Behar launches into pointed claims about Johnson's character, questioning everything from his masculinity to his motives, from his charitable acts to his beliefs. But even the kindest person has a breaking point, and we're about to reach it. The morning began like any other at the studio of The View, buzzing with vibrant energy. Word had spread that Dwayne Johnson would be appearing, and excitement rippled through everyone, from crew members arranging the set to fans filling the audience seats. This wasn't just another celebrity guest. This was The Rock, a global figure whose words about gratitude, resilience, and mental health had inspired countless people. His reputation for authenticity made him one of the most admired figures in entertainment. Johnson arrived carrying the same warmth that made the world fall in love with him. Fresh from promoting a blockbuster already dominating the box office, he greeted everyone with that unmistakable grin. He looked poised and energized, as if he were stepping into yet another chance to uplift viewers with his story. How he went from having only $7 to becoming one of the highest-paid actors alive. He wore a sharp, understated suit that somehow softened his massive physical presence, making him approachable and grounded. What he didn't realize was that the tone of the interview had already been set, and not by him. Unbeknownst to Johnson, Joy Behar had spent the night preparing not thoughtful questions about his craft or his success, but a series of pointed accusations fueled by her own imagined conclusions. In her mind, she was ready to challenge the facade she believed surrounded him. In reality, she was preparing to unleash a barrage of unwarranted negativity, a display less about truth and more about confrontation. And the unsuspecting atmosphere made what happened next even more jarring. As Johnson walked onto the set, the studio erupted. The audience leapt to their feet with a roar of applause, not out of obligation, but pure admiration. Phones went up, people beamed with excitement, and an energy filled the room that only Johnson could generate. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dwayne Johnson. Whoopi Goldberg announced with unmistakable sincerity. Johnson waved, every inch the charismatic presence fans adored. Just by stepping on stage, he lifted the room. If only he knew the storm waiting behind that warm welcome. Dwayne smiled as he settled comfortably into his chair, radiating that effortless confidence he'd earned through decades of connecting with audiences around the world. "Thank you all for having me," he said warmly. "Always a pleasure sitting with you ladies." Sunny Hostin, Sarah Haynes, and Alyssa Farrah Griffin lit up with genuine appreciation. Even Joy Behar offered a polite smile, though a closer look revealed something measured, something almost rehearsed lurking behind her eyes. Whoopi followed the well-worn path of any celebrity interview. "So, Dwayne, this new movie, I heard it's smashing records already." Dwayne's enthusiasm overflowed instantly. "I'm beyond grateful," he said, and the sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. "The fans have been unbelievable. The cast was incredible to work with. We wanted to give families something fun. Action, heart, the whole package." Sarah leaned in, grinning. "And your posts during filming were hilarious. That video of you trying to squeeze into that tiny trailer?" I cried laughing. The audience chuckled as Dwayne laughed, a deep, booming laugh that pulled everyone in with its warmth. "Hey, When you're 6'5" and built like a refrigerator, even a big trailer feels like a toy. But you've got to laugh at yourself, right? For several minutes, everything flowed the way a great interview should. Dwayne spoke lovingly about his daughters, shared his passion for telling diverse stories through his production company, and discussed choosing roles that uplifted people. The crowd was completely absorbed. Even the crew looked more invested than usual, leaning in as if they were witnessing something special. But then, almost like a cold wind sweeping across a warm room, Joy shifted in her seat. It wasn't dramatic, but the effect was. Anyone familiar with live TV could feel the shift. The energy thickened, the tone tightened. Something was coming. Dwayne, Joy said, her voice suddenly sharp, stripped of friendliness. There's something that's been bothering me for quite some time. Dwayne remained polite, but a subtle stiffness entered his posture, a telltale sign he sensed danger. Of course, Joy, he replied evenly. What would you like to discuss? Joy leaned forward, her demeanor transforming from conversational host to interrogator. I've watched your career carefully, she began, voice firm and escalating. And I'm deeply troubled by the message you're sending to young people, especially young men. The other host traded uneasy looks. This wasn't on the rundown. This wasn't approved. And in that moment, it became painfully clear Joy was about to ambush him. I'm not sure I understand, Dwayne said, still controlled but alert. What message do you think I'm sending? Joy didn't hesitate. This hyper-masculine, muscle-obsessed, solve everything with violence persona, she said sharply. Don't you think it's promoting toxic masculinity? Don't you think you're reinforcing the worst aspects of male behavior? The room fell silent. The kind of silence where even the air feels heavy. Moments earlier, the studio had been buzzing with excitement. Now, it felt like everyone was holding their breath. Dwayne's jaw tightened just enough for viewers to notice. Still, his voice remained steady, remarkably so, given the sudden attack. Joy, he said carefully, I think you might be misunderstanding my work. I've spent my entire life trying to uplift others, promoting kindness, hard work, respect. I genuinely don't know what led you to that conclusion. Oh, please, Joy snapped, waving her hand with theatrical dismissiveness. Every movie you make, you're the tough guy smashing your way through problems. What kind of example is that for boys watching you? The smile that had charmed the room minutes before dimmed slightly, but Dwayne kept the composure through visible restraint. Joy, he said, voice low and steady, you're painting an extremely oversimplified picture of what I do. And in that moment, the tension crackled so sharply through the room that everyone knew something much bigger was about to unfold. Dwayne took a measured breath. Most of the characters I play, he began, are built around themes like protecting family, standing up for the vulnerable, overcoming hardship through perseverance, and yes, working together. Joy let out a sharp, joyless laugh. There was no humor, only disdain. Teamwork? Come on, Dwayne, let's cut the act. You're selling an outdated, harmful picture of manhood. Boys watch you and think they need to be these hard, dominant figures who muscle their way through problems instead of learning empathy or emotional maturity. The pressure in the room thickened like fog. Sunny shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Sarah stared down at her notes with the intensity of someone trying not to vanish. Whoopi looked like she was weighing every possible intervention. Joy, meanwhile, seemed to thrive on the mounting discomfort, fueled by the tension she herself had created. And another thing, she pushed on, her voice rising as she gained momentum. This whole people's champion thing you parade around online, don't you think it's a little dishonest? You're a multi-millionaire with mansions, private jets, and a lifestyle most people can't even imagine. How can you pretend to relate to the average person who's scraping by paycheck to paycheck? Isn't that just fake? Dwayne's hands tightened subtly on the armrests, the first visible sign of strain. His voice remained controlled, though an unmistakable edge had formed beneath the calm. Joy, I grew up in a working-class household. My mother cleaned houses to support us. My father wrestled for inconsistent pay. We were evicted more times than I can count. I know what real struggle looks like. That experience shaped me. It will always be part of who I am. Joy pounced before the weight of his words could settle. But that was then. This is now. You can't seriously claim you understand what a single mother juggling 3 jobs goes through today just to keep the lights on. No, Dwayne replied softly, and paradoxically, the softness made his words land even harder. I can't know her exact experience anymore, but I can listen. I can support the organizations that help her. I can shine a light on stories that deserve attention. I can remind people they matter. Joy rolled her eyes dramatically. Oh, the charity angle. Right, another convenient PR stunt to keep your brand polished. That was the moment something deep within Dwayne shifted. The genial charm remained, but underneath it, the fighter emerged, the man who had clawed his way from having nothing to becoming a global powerhouse. His expression sharpened with unmistakable resolve. "Joy," he said, his voice low, deliberate, and suddenly commanding the attention of every soul in the studio. "I'm not sure what's motivating this barrage, but we need to slow down before this goes nowhere good." Barrage? Joy barked out another hollow laugh. "I'm doing my job. Journalism is about asking the hard questions, holding powerful figures accountable." The other hosts now looked visibly rattled. Even the audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Whoopi finally stepped in, her words careful and diplomatic. "Maybe we should shift gears here." But Joy wasn't having it. If anything, Whoopi's attempt to redirect only emboldened her. "No, this is exactly the conversation we should be having." Joy insisted. "Dwayne, you've built an entire brand out of being this immaculate role model. But don't you think it's dangerous? Yes, dangerous. For a man your size and influence to keep promoting brute strength as he answered to life's problems." Dwayne leaned back slowly. The room drained of sound except for the soft whir of cameras and studio lights. He exhaled once, steady and controlled. When he finally spoke, the tone of his voice shifted, quiet, firm, and carrying a sense of finality that made the whole studio sit up straighter. "Joy." And that single word carried enough weight to make the entire room freeze. Dwayne held her gaze, steady and unbroken. "My entire career," he said, voice calm but resonant, "has been devoted to helping people become stronger, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. I've encouraged education, vulnerability, kindness, discipline, and the strength to get through difficult seasons of life. If everything I've done, on screen and off, reduces in your eyes to nothing more than violence and toxic masculinity, then that reveals far more about your interpretation of the world than it does about my intentions." Joy's cheeks flushed a deep shade of red at the precision of his response. Rather than pausing to reconsider, she doubled down, taking his measured words as a provocation. "Oh, so now I'm the issue?" She shot back, her hand slicing the air. "I'm the one misinterpreting? That's rich coming from someone who's made a fortune playing the same cardboard cutout tough guy for 20 years. The studio had become a vacuum, silent, tense, suffocating. Moments earlier the audience had been electric. Now, every person sat frozen. Sarah fidgeted with her note cards. Sunny stared downward, her expression tight with discomfort. Whoopi's face was a portrait of someone desperately searching for an off-ramp from an unfolding disaster. Dwayne's expression barely shifted, but subtle cues betrayed the internal tightening. A slight narrowing at the corners of his eyes, slower, controlled breaths. He was a man who had mastered the art of redirecting anger, turning heat into clarity, but even he had boundaries. "Joy," he began, the calmness now carrying a razor-thin edge. "I came on this show today to share some joy, some positivity, to talk about the work I'm proud of. I'm genuinely confused as to why you've turned this into a targeted attack on my character." "Targeted attack?" Joy's voice jumped an octave. "I'm doing what responsible journalists do, holding powerful people accountable. Someone has to, considering you walk around pretending to be some flawless saint. So let's talk about that time you backed a politician with extremely controversial views on women's reproductive rights." For the first time, Dwayne's confusion was unmistakable. His brows pulled together. "I honestly have no idea what you're talking about, and I think you may be seriously misinformed." "Don't play dumb," Joy snapped, leaning in. "You know exactly who I'm referring to. You endorsed someone who wanted to roll back women's rights, and when your PR team told you it would look bad, you suddenly disavowed it. Dwayne's voice dropped half an octave, and the air in the room tightened like the moment before a storm breaks. "Joy," he said, each word deliberate and loaded with warning. "I have never supported anyone who would threaten women's rights. I have 3 daughters. Their autonomy, their futures, their freedom mean more to me than anything. If you want to accuse me of something that's serious, you better be absolutely certain of your facts." Now the room truly faltered. Whoopi looked horrified. Sarah shook her head, stunned. Sunny's jaw clenched as she fought back either outrage or tears. No one could tell which. "Facts." Joy laughed sharply, the sound brittle and biting. "The fact is you're just another Hollywood hypocrite, pretending to be authentic while hiding behind carefully crafted PR talking points. You talk about integrity, but everything about your image is manufactured." Dwayne's grip tightened on the armrests, the tendons in his hands visible from the pressure. But when he spoke, his voice became even quieter, a controlled whisper of thunder. "Joy, I'm giving you one chance, one opportunity, to retract what you just said. I have been respectful to you and everyone here, despite the hostility you've directed at me from the moment this interview turned. But accusing me of lying about my values, about my integrity, based on false information, that crosses a line." Instead of recognizing the warning, Joy leaned in closer, mistaking restraint for surrender. Her eyes gleamed with something cold and triumphant. "Oh, really?" she taunted. "What are you going to do? Flex your muscles at me? Prove everything I've been saying? Show the world that when the big, tough action star doesn't get his way, he turns to intimidation?" And that was the moment the studio collectively inhaled, because everyone sensed they were inches away from a breaking point no one would be able to walk back from. The studio had fallen into an almost eerie stillness. You could practically feel the tension pressing down on the room, as if even air refused to move. The camera crew froze, uncertain whether to keep rolling or cut the feed. All eyes locked onto Johnson, who stood staring at Joy, not with anger this time, but with something far deeper. And that's when everything shifted. His expression softened in a way that hit harder than any raised voice ever could. What once looked like irritation now revealed unmistakable hurt. The kind of hurt that comes from realizing someone is being cruel simply because they can. "Joy," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, yet somehow ringing with absolute clarity across the silent set. "I've been doing this for over 20 years. I've dealt with people who don't like my films, who think I'm overrated, who say I play the same guy in every movie. And that's fine. That's part of being in the spotlight." He paused, and the silence grew heavier. "But what you're doing right now, this isn't criticism. This isn't journalism. It's not accountability. It's cruelty. Pure, deliberate cruelty." He shook his head gently. "You're sitting here on national television, inventing stories about me, attacking my character with things you know aren't true. You're trying to pull apart everything I've spent my life building. And I honestly don't understand why. What did I ever do to you to deserve that?" For the first time, Joy's expression wavered. Not much, just a tiny crack, but enough to reveal she felt the blow. Still, her pride wouldn't let her step back. "I'm doing my job," she insisted. "I'm asking the questions people need answers to." But Johnson wasn't buying it. "No," he said softly, a sadness settling into his voice. "Your job is to inform people, to entertain, to challenge responsibly, not to weaponize your platform to spread lies and stir hatred at someone who's done nothing to you. Those are 2 very different things." Whoopi finally stepped in, desperation creeping into her tone. "Maybe we should go to break." Before she could finish, Joy cut her off sharply. "No. I think people deserve to see the real Dwayne Johnson, the one who gets upset when someone pokes holes in his perfect image." The remark hung in the air like a slap. Johnson looked around. At Joy, at the other hosts, at the audience whose excitement had turned into uncomfortable disbelief. When he spoke again, his voice carried a heartbreaking sincerity. "Joy, I actually feel sorry for you. I mean that because this obsessive need to tear people apart says nothing about me. It says everything about you. You look for the worst in everyone. You're so focused on destruction that you can't see any good at all. Oh, please, Joy scoffed. Spare me the therapy session monologue. But Johnson didn't stop. If anything, his voice grew steadier. I've spent my life trying to lift people up. I've worked with charities for years. I've visited sick kids when no cameras were around. I've tried to use whatever influence I have to make someone's day a little brighter. And here you are, trying to tear that down. Why? Because it gets views? Because you think it makes you look tough? Because you want a viral moment. Joy's face heated. Anger, embarrassment, or the dawning realization she may have gone too far. No one could tell. You're not the hero you pretend to be, she snapped. Nobody is. I've never claimed to be, Johnson replied firmly. I've owned every mistake I've made. I've talked about my battles with depression, my father's struggles, the darker parts of my life. I've never hidden from any of it. I just try to learn, grow, and be better. He took a breath, then added with unwavering honesty. And none of that deserves the kind of cruelty you're choosing right now. Johnson rose slightly from his chair, not in anger, not in threat, but with the calm dignity of someone who had finally reached his breaking point, the kind of stillness that signals a line has been crossed. And the energy in the room shifted instantly. What you're doing today, Joy, he said, steady and composed, has nothing to do with helping me grow or holding me accountable. This is about dragging someone down so you can feel bigger, more relevant, more powerful. And I'm done letting you do that. Joy snapped back quickly, but her voice carried a quiver she couldn't quite hide. Oh, so now you're running away? Can't take a little criticism. Johnson looked at her, not with anger, but with unmistakable pity. Joy, criticism is saying you didn't like a film I made. Criticism is questioning a business move or asking about an actual stance I've taken. What you've done for the past half hour is attempt to tear apart my character using made-up accusations. That's not criticism. That's character assassination. And if you honestly can't tell the difference, then I truly feel sorry for you. That landed harder than any raised voice ever could. Around the table, the other hosts couldn't hide their reactions. Sonny looked horrified. Sarah seemed embarrassed to even be present. Whoopi looked like she might crawl under the desk and vanish. And the audience, once buzzed with excitement, now sat frozen. The shift in the room was undeniable. They had come expecting a fun interview and instead witnessed an emotional ambush. Johnson continued, his voice calm but heavy with truth. You know what hurts the most about all this? You have an incredible platform. Millions of people watch you. You could use your voice to lift up people who need help, to shed light on real issues. But instead, this is what you choose. Manufactured outrage, empty attacks, lies meant only to destroy. For the first time, Joy's confidence faltered completely. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. The woman known for always having something to say suddenly had nothing. That silence was louder than anything spoken. Johnson looked around the studio one last time. The humiliated hosts, the stunned crew, the audience staring wide-eyed. I think we're done here, he said quietly. And those 4 words hit like the closing of a door that would never reopen. A long, uneasy silence filled the set. Johnson reached down and unclipped his microphone. The small metallic click echoed across the studio like a final punctuation mark. His movements were deliberate, steady, every gesture carrying the weight of a man making a choice he didn't want to make, but absolutely had to. Then, without another word, Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, stood up and walked off the set. The audience erupted into applause. Not polite applause, thunderous applause. Applause that spoke not just for him, but against what they had witnessed. Joy Behar sat frozen, staring into nothing, her earlier bravado drained away. She looked stunned, and for the first time, aware of the line she had crossed. The cameras kept recording for a few seconds longer, capturing one of the most uncomfortable moments in daytime TV history as the host sat speechless, unable to mask their shock. Backstage, Johnson was immediately swallowed by his team, publicists, managers, assistants, voices overlapping as they rushed to him with concerned apologies and questions. But Johnson lifted a hand, stopping them gently. I'm okay, he said softly. And though his voice was steady, his hands trembled slightly, the only visible sign of the emotional weight he'd been carrying. I said what needed to be said. There's nothing for me to apologize for. His publicist's phone buzzed nonstop. Media outlets, reporters, industry friends, all try to make sense of the explosive moment that had just unfolded. And Dwayne Johnson stood there, quiet, composed, and dignified, a man who walked away before allowing cruelty to turn him into something he wasn't. Clips of the shocking interview flooded every platform, and the hashtag Dwayne Johnson rocketed to the #1 trending spot worldwide. Audiences weren't just sharing the moment. They were analyzing it, replaying it, and calling it one of the most jaw-dropping live TV confrontations in years. But while the world reacted in real time, something even more intense was unfolding behind the scenes. The moment the show cut to an emergency commercial break, the studio atmosphere snapped like a rubber band stretched too far. Whoopi turned on Joy with an expression that carried more weight than any words could, and when she finally spoke, her voice trembled with controlled fury. "Joy, what was that?" Not playful, not teasing. A genuine reprimand. We do not ambush guests. We do not slander people on air. What were you thinking? Joy tried to muster a defense, but the conviction simply wasn't there. I was just asking tough questions. No, Sonny cut in, her voice shaking with emotion. Those weren't questions. That was a full-blown character attack. You targeted a man who has done nothing but good. And you did it using lies. That is not journalism. Sarah nodded, visibly disturbed. I'm honestly embarrassed to have been at this table. Dwayne Johnson is one of the kindest people in this industry. And you try to tear him down for what? For drama? And just like that, the weight of Joy's actions finally hit her. The fire that fueled her aggression had flickered into something else. Realization, guilt, and maybe even fear. When the show returned from commercial, the tone was completely different. The air felt heavier, more sober. Whoopi addressed the camera with a seriousness the audience wasn't used to seeing. We want to extend an apology to Dwayne Johnson and all of you watching. What happened earlier does not represent this show or our values. Joy sat silent. No defense. No witty retort. Just the expression of someone who understood, far too late, that she had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. But the world wasn't done reacting. Within hours, the incident dominated entertainment news. Articles popped up everywhere, dissecting the confrontation from every angle. And overwhelmingly, the world sided with Johnson. Critics who had long complained about the decline of daytime TV pointed to this moment as a turning point, a sign that audiences were done with cheap hostility disguised as tough questions. Celebrities posted their support immediately. Kevin Hart shared a message praising Johnson's grace under pressure. Emily Blunt recounted a story about his kindness on set. Fans, even those who had never met him, rallied around him, defending the man who had always represented humility and strength. Ironically, the controversy caused the show's ratings to surge in the moment, but the long-term consequences were brutal. Sponsors raised concerns. The network received thousands of complaints. And suddenly, Joy Behar found herself at the center of a firestorm completely of her own creation. And what about Johnson? He handled the aftermath the only way a true leader could, with calm, compassion, and dignity. He never fired back, never insulted Joy, never demanded accountability or revenge. When asked about the incident later, he simply said, "Sometimes people are dealing with their own pain, and it comes out in unfortunate ways. I hope she finds peace." That single sentence spread across social media like wildfire, grace in the face of hostility, strength without aggression. It only made people admire him more. Soon, the clip became required viewing in media studies classes, a masterclass in how to maintain integrity when someone tries to break you down on live television. Students watched with awe as Johnson responded to hostility with truth, maintained composure under attack, and ultimately chose to walk away rather than feed the negativity. And the message was clear. Sometimes the strongest move isn't fighting harder. It's stepping away with your dignity intact. Dwayne Johnson proved once again why people call him the people's champion. Not because his life is perfect, not because he never faces adversity, but because of how he rises above it.